makes me wonder, and take this wherever you're comfortable taking it. And maybe it's philosophical, maybe it's spiritual, but you mentioned before, like, you can see your mom now and understand why she was the way she
Oh,
was, why your stepfather
absolutely.
was the way they were. And by no means does it excuse it or make it okay, exactly as you said.
Right.
But as you think about that, like, is there a sense of like, well, it's not their fault? Like, there's nothing they could do because they were products of their circumstance and that, like, how do you
No.
think about that on like a very grand level? Is it still
Oh,
you
I
hold them
have a
accountable?
very simple response to it. There is still no excuse because you know what? I was abused as a child. And as a result, I decided I didn't want to have children because they say they talk about cycles, generational cycles. It's not about generational cycles. It's that people don't know anything else. But guess what? You still, if I have this feeling like if you're over like 13, 14 years old, you know right from wrong. You have choices to make at every fork in the road in your life. You make choices, and those choices are yours and yours only to make and to act on.
Mm.
And you are accountable to them. So when I decided I did, change my mind and maybe I will have a kid, I made a pointed decision. I didn't know what to do with a baby any more than the next person. And it's not like I had a mother or anybody to call for advice because the last person I would call for that is my mother.
Mm.
But I made the choice that I was going to be anything other than what my mother and stepfather were. And
Mm.
you know what? I didn't abuse my kid. And
Mm.
that was a choice. I
Mm.
raised him very differently. I raised him very consciously. I made conscious decisions not to treat him or even speak to him in any way that was like what I went through because I would never want to do that to another human being. And I think this goes back to the truth because I
Yeah.
think people that, like my mother and stepfather who don't they continue the cycle of how, whatever they went through and whatever their trauma and their experiences, it's because they won't accept their truth. They won't accept their truth because until you accept it, you will not heal from it. That is step number one. You have to accept what happened to you and how
Well,
it happened to you and all this stuff. And when people want to deny that because of whatever shame or guilt or whatever it is, then all they do is continue on the same path and nothing ever changes.
it's such an interesting, and I say interesting in the purest sense, obviously with all
Yeah, I
sensitivity to
understand.
how significant and serious it is,
It's
because
fascinating,
well,
honestly.
it is because even what we were talking about before, in your case, where it's like your whole mind becomes distorted. You're a product of your
Yeah.
circumstance, and you can't think any better. I could see somebody looking at that and saying, "Well, your mom or your stepdad, it's the same thing. Like they couldn't make a better decision." And on the one hand, I get that. I understand how maybe in their heads, just like you with your ex-husband, right, where you felt like, oh, I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm doing it anyway. I think I've taken a general philosophy on life, which sounds similar to yours, which is like we should all this is hard to say because I understand the danger of this, but we should all almost assume the worst in ourselves in some extent, to some extent, just to like be that healthy skepticism to be like, am I a narcissist? Am I doing something that's hurting my
Right.
child? Am I getting into a relationship that's not good with me? And genuinely force ourselves to consider that might be true, even if our mind is telling us otherwise. Because again, obviously, I have no idea, but I can imagine in your stepfather's case, maybe there was some sense of like, oh, maybe I shouldn't treat this little girl this way. Maybe this isn't the best thing for me to do. But then there's a narrative, there's a story because it's a defense mechanism, because of damage that he's had, whatever, that says, no, 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 it's okay. She deserves it. It's all good. And that ability, as you said, to make that choice to say, you know what, I'm not going to just believe that. I'm actually going to seek the truth. I'm going to
Mhm.
find ways to see. Maybe I'll ask somebody else. Maybe I'll just meditate on it by myself for an hour. But whatever it is, to really question yourself and try and get to the truth is perhaps the hardest thing we can do. But I think we all need to force ourselves to do that. And I think your story and what you've been through and your family members that you've had experience with are the perfect example of that. It's easy in some ways for people to say, well, it's not their fault. They couldn't help it. They grew up in that.
Mhm.
True, sensitive to that. I get that. But that's where that responsibility for all of us comes in, as you're saying, to say, like, it's not good enough. You have to question, you have to challenge yourself, because if you're causing suffering for somebody else, particularly your child, like that can't happen. Like we have to figure out a better way than that. And it's tough though. It's tough because you can kind of see all sides of it. But at the end of the day, I think that's being a human, at least being a good human, is trying to be
Exactly.
better.
Exactly, but not everybody wants to,
Not
and that's
everybody
the
wants
thing.
to.
But, that's why I have, back to this acceptance, one of the things I had to accept during my healing was that I can't control other people. There is nothing I'm going to say or ever do
Yeah.
to be good enough for my mother and so like I can't control their behavior. I can't control how they feel. I can't make, just like if I see somebody in an abusive situation, I can't make them leave. They have to want to get out of that.
Mm.
So all I can do is control myself. And I have this very idealistic, philosophy that it's like dominoes. It starts in your home. It starts with you.
Mm.
It starts with you and how you treat and how you speak to your partner or spouse and to your children, whoever else might live in your home, your roommate, whoever. And then they go out into the world with whatever gifts you have given them of encouragement and support and love and all these wonderful things we hope we put into their hearts. And then they go to work and they spread it there, and they go to school and they spread it there, and they go, and then it
Mm.
grows into the larger community, the state level. Maybe world peace can be solved this way. I don't know. But I think that so many people are, a lot of people can't or won't take on that kind of accountability and that kind of it requires effort to really be conscious.
Mm.
And most people, and forgive me if anyone's offended, but it's just how I feel. I think most people just go through their lives unconsciously, kind of like worker ants. You're going through the motions, doing your thing, and that's it. You don't want to give effort. You're tired. You're exhausted. You have 4 kids you just took care of all day and ran
Mhm.
around to sports and school and cooked dinner and laundry, and the dog's been out, and you're just tired of what you don't want to deal with this
Mhm.
mental stuff because it's exhausting. It's exhausting to be accountable. It's exhausting to think about these things and to make the effort to be different or consider, perspectives and all these things we're talking about.